Welcome to this episode of Baptist Press This Week, brought to you by the College at Southeastern. I'm Brandon Porter. In this episode of Baptist Press This Week, we have two pastors who are a part of the Abuse Reform Implementation Task Force. They are, of course, a part of a very important effort being carried out for the SBC as we head to the 2023 annual meeting in New Orleans. Stay with us for this important conversation with these leaders. Well, thanks for joining us for Baptist Press This Week. We have with us members of the Abuse Reform Implementation Task Force, Marshall Blaylock and John Nelson. Thank you both for joining us on Baptist Press This Week. We haven't been doing this very long here at Baptist Press, but I think, Pastor Blaylock, you're going to be our first guest with, I guess, an organ in the background for the interview. So you will go down in Baptist Press This Week history for that accolade. There have been several updates over the last few weeks from the task force, including that presentation at the executive committee back in February. The ministry checklist is one of the things, if not the thing, that seems to be getting the most attention from folks. I guess the first question I would ask is if the SBC is plowing new ground with the ministry checklist. And what I mean by that is, are there other denominations or similar religious groups with a checklist like this?
First of all, thanks for letting us be here with you. John and I both are appreciative of the opportunity to do this. And we have a group of 9 folks that are working together on this, all great people, and we're grateful for the opportunity to serve Southern Baptists like this. I will say that it's not the simplest job any task force has ever been given. But we're thankful that it's an important task, and I think the whole convention agrees, we want to do all we can to prevent sexual abuse in our churches, to make our churches the safest place on earth for our families and children to hear and receive the gospel of Jesus. That's the goal. That's where we are. And so last year in Anaheim, our convention voted overwhelmingly to do this ministry check website. And it's unique because we've never done something like this before. In fact, we were told for a long time it was impossible to do. We're learning that it's nearly impossible to do, but it can be done. And we have looked at other denominations and what they're doing, but no one has a system like ours. Our churches are all autonomous. And so everything we do relies on cooperation and goodwill, and so to do a database, a ministry check website requires bottom up cooperation, and I shouldn't even say bottom up because bottom sounds like it's a bad word. It's local church cooperation at the grassroots level, and that's who we are. That's our church is, as you might expect, kind of an old church, been around for 340 years, and we're helping plant new churches in our city. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be at one of our newest churches in the city to help be part of the celebration to start it. But whether you're a brand new church or whether you've been around a long time, we have one common root, and that is we all want to serve Christ together, but we're independent of each other. We're autonomous. So we don't know of any other denomination that's like ours in that respect, that's trying to do what we're trying to do. So we've looked and we've seen different models that people have, but there's no model for this, which makes it more complicated and which creates quite a bit of discussion, actually, among Baptists. That's one of the things that's one of our strengths is we all have autonomous churches, and we all are able to bring different strengths to the table. And we're getting lots of input about this and how to best make this happen. But that's what we want to do. We want to hear from others. We want to do the best we can, and we want to produce the best information so Baptists can say, we want to stop predators from going church to church. A national database is the only way we can track this for churches, and churches send the information in, and then we're able to track these things so that people won't go from church to church without anybody knowing about it.
Yeah, Pastor Nelson, you're also President Nelson, right, of the Missouri Baptist Convention?
Just passed.
Just
Pastor
passed.
Williams,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So talk a little bit about that, because like Pastor Blaylock talked about, I mean, this really is kind of threading the needle between, churches in friendly cooperation with one another versus more of a hierarchical form of church governance that we would see in the Presbyterian Church or the Methodist Church. Do you all talk about that in the task force? Is that something that comes up in your consideration?
I think that's on the front of our mind. And just thank you so much for even doing this interview, Brother Brandon. It's an honor to be on here with you. But that is on the front of our mind in all of our conversations as we're looking to really thread the needle, as you said. And how do we move forward with Baptists when you have 40,000 plus independent Baptist churches around the world? We want to work in friendly cooperation, but we also want to stamp out this scourge. The scourge that has an 80% recidivism rate. And I just want to say that again, because a lot of times we want to skate over the issue, but the Department of Justice said that this is an 80% recidivism rate. Individuals that are doing this in our church, survivors that have been talking about this for 20, 30 years, we have the opportunity to provide them justice, but we can do that while working in friendly cooperation with each other and not against our polity. And so that's something we talk about constantly. And very quickly, when ideals are brought up that seem to go against our polity, we smack those down and try to reform them in different ways. And we looked at that here in Missouri, and now we're looking at it nationwide. And it gets trickier the larger it goes, but it's worth the fight.
Okay. When you say that the 80% recidivism, talk a little bit about that. Explain that to us.
Yeah. So when you look up lifetime, if you go on the Department of Justice site, you look up the lifetime sex offender recidivism rate. They did a 25-year review, follow-up study on those that were actual sexual offenders, and over 80% of them. And by the way, the recidivism rate is a very important component of criminal justice. My father was a law enforcement officer, and he talked about the recidivism rate of prisoners and multiple offenders. Most sex offenders will offend again. And if churches are still soft targets for them to offend, if they're not having the background checks, we don't know who's there, if there are individuals that can jump church to church, congregation to congregation. If you're in a small church, the average church is 75 people or less in the United States of America. If you are in a small church that doesn't have the resources to do all this background, this Ministry Check website is a simple, straightforward, and robust and secure way for those churches to be able to use that. We're not talking to the large church. When I was baptized in, that was 5,000 people. They have the resources. We're talking about the small churches that make up the majority of our convention that need these resources so that an individual doesn't swoop in, use all their charm, and then all of a sudden end up doing the exact same thing again and hurting another child, another adult, another person in the kingdom of God. That's the worst that you can do.
Okay. Thinking about this Ministry Check, another question I would ask is, why couldn't we create our own? Why do we need a third party to oversee this? I mean, I can understand that the building of it perhaps, but then as we move forward, the overseeing of it, why a third party to do that?
Well, first of all, we were charged with trying to identify a firm that could create a database of this nature. You had to know a couple things about what was required. There's a long list, but there's a short list I can give that's fairly uncomplicated, and that is, it had to be a company that had the legal staff to be able to discern whether these reports that come in are legally defensible reports. We don't ever want someone to turn something in and we post it on a website and find out later it's not a credible accusation. So we knew we had to have a firm that had a legal staff that was capable of giving expert legal advice so that all the information that goes on the database, the website, is legally defensible. and meets our standards of civil court standards.
Mhm.
We also had to have a company that that had expertise in investigations. While the database Ministry Check website doesn't do the investigation, they have to certify when a church has an investigation that comes forward, an independent investigation, that investigation was done to all the proper standards that we require. And
Mhm.
so whatever firm does this has to have licensed investigators that do things in all 50 states to be able to help um, discern whether the investigations were done properly so that the information on their database is actually correct. You also had to have a firm that had the ability to create a public website, but also to have secure data in the background so that it can't be hacked into. And there are multiple other points of this. Those were the big, very difficult, challenging pieces to put together in one company. And right now, the SBC doesn't have the resources and wherewithal to put together all that information at once. Is it possible down the road that that we could develop such once the database and the website is up? That's possible. We're not, but our charge was to find a firm that could do this and help set it up at the earliest possible time, but also earliest possible time to get it done right. So,
Okay.
so that was our charge to find the firm that could do this, and that's what we've done.
Let me
Okay.
also add
Mhm.
one of the things that I think is also paramount that we kind of missed in the conversation online is a firm that's willing to understand our culture and theology.
Mhm.
And one thing that Faithbased Solution has done is they've taken Samantha Kilpatrick, who is a Southeastern grad, who goes to a Southern Baptist church, is a Southern Baptist member, who understands our theology, who understands our culture, and understands the importance of our autonomy, juxtaposed to every other denomination, and really helps to shape. And so they're not crossing intentionally or unintentionally these lines that we have in the sand that we say these are non-starters for Baptist. There are firms out there that are like, hey, you should do it this way, but they come from the top tier down, Presbyterian, Catholic, dealing with those denominations, but that is not tenable for us. And so understanding our theology, our the way that we're built is such a paramount thing for us. And having a firm that understood that and is willing to work alongside us to not only maintain that, but also to create a database that would honor that was also key in our committee.
Okay, so as we think about faith-based solutions, let's talk about that for just a moment since you mentioned it. So that is, how would you describe that? Is that a department of Guidepost? Is it separate from Guidepost? How would you, how can folks understand the relationship between faith-based solutions and Guidepost?
So last year, our convention employed Guidepost Solutions to do the investigation that the convention voted in the year before. And Guidepost is a large company, a secular company, and this past summer there were questions about Guidepost point of view on certain matters that are ethical issues that we have certain. We as a convention have standards and values based on the Bible that we don't want to compromise on. And so it was apparent that Guidepost, a secular company, had values that are not consistent with ours. But throughout that investigation, they respected our values, which was important to us. And what happened this year is our task force went back to them and said, that was helpful. You respected our values, but we're not going to be able to recommend Guideposts the way things are now. And so what they did is actually created a new division, separate name, and called Faith-Based Solutions. And so what people ask me, and they say, well, did your convictions change? And I say, no, my convictions didn't change. What happened was Guideposts moved toward us by creating a whole new division of people that actually share our convictions. And Samantha Kilpatrick is the lead officer of that whole division. And they don't just respect our values, they actually share our values. And that was a huge step for us, because we needed a company that had the expertise and all the ability to do these things. But we knew we needed a company that shared our values as well. And so that's what Guidepost did, created a whole new division. Now, they're not only working with us, they're working with multiple other churches and denominations that share our values. There's plenty of churches out there that share our values, not just SBC. And so Faithbased Solutions is working with a variety of folks in that space. And they don't just respect, but they also share our convictions on these important matters.
Pastor John, anything to add on that?
No, I think what you're hearing is really kind of the internal discussions of what we walked through, because it was not something that we came through, in any kind of flippant way. We very much understood, what was coming back at us when we said Guidepost. But at the exact same time, when we looked at them and said, "Hey, this is our issues that we have with your firm," and they said, "Here's our solution, Faith-Based Solutions," they decided to move towards us in a way that was not only tenable, but also could work very well for both sides. They still are able to do the work they do. We're still able to do the work we need to do to move us forward. And really, if you go to our website and look through all the different firms that we posted up there, 10 out of the 11 things that the messenger set forth for us, they hit. Nobody was close to that.
So just thinking about those ethical convictions, I think it's when we think about the LGBT movement, I think the concern is probably more than just a tweet that they tweeted during the month of June last year. Maybe the concern is related to as Christians look, as Southern Baptists look at the LGBT movement, it's more than just marriage. We see battles being fought about gender transition. We see, drag queens in public libraries and local governments wrestling with that. So that this issue is a larger issue than just one issue being marriage. And here at the same time, let's just, if that's a sexuality, a view of sexuality, here we are also talking about a skewed view of sexuality being the abuse. And I think I see the concerns that Southern Baptist would have partnering. So but at the end of the day, Faith-Based Solutions is still a division. I think that was your word, a division of Guidepost. How maybe help with some of those ways you talked about. They move toward us rather than us moving toward them. They move toward us. What were some, obviously Faith-Based Solutions would be one evidence of that. What are some other tangible things that you all have seen in conversation with them to show that they are trying to move toward at least understanding and being sensitive to our faith and practice?
So a couple things. One, I love and respect Baptists all across the country, even those that have questions about this and are having difficulty with it, because our task force shared a lot of those same concerns. In fact, I would say the vast majority of us on the front end shared those exact same concerns. And you need to understand, it's not just the questions on sexuality, but there are other questions too out there, including the life issue. There's plenty of issues where Baptists have, so we represent people who share those exact same values.
Amen.
Want to see God honored in people's lives. Don't want to see people taking the lives of the unborn. We don't want to see people misled by a movement about sexuality. Not just, there's plenty of sexual sin that's being pushed on our society right now. So, and so we don't want to partner with any of that. Honestly, that's not who we are. And so just know that it's hard to explain this without all the time and processes that we went through to get where we are. But here are a couple things about it. One, we wanted to find the best firm possible to do the work that Baptist asked us to do. We wrote off a number of firms that affirm and support values that are antithetical to ours, not just on sexuality issues, but others as well. And because we couldn't recommend them. We searched for companies who actually shared our values that could do the job. And we asked Baptists all across the country, if you have a name of a company, let us know. We need your help. And we've asked that on more than one occasion publicly through Baptist Press, one of them. And we didn't get, we had one company suggested from outside sources. And that particular company just didn't have the resources, legal or, they had very few resources to do this. It was impossible for them to do the job. And they recognized after we talked to them. So we were in a place where we said, we have to find a way to get someone who shares our values, who can do the job. And so that's when our conversation with Guidepost renewed and they moved toward us. So how do you get comfortable with that? Honestly, for us, you sit across the table from Samantha Kilpatrick, who leads this new division, and you hear her heart and how her testimony led to her conviction to go into law and then to prosecute sex criminals, and then realize that she needed more to be able to help the folks who are surviving these crimes. And she went to seminary and she's done all these different things. You hear her heart and you say, she's one of us. And so the decision became more and more obvious when we began to see who they put in Faith-Based Solutions, who's leading it, what their values are. And we had, I don't want to be too, when you have a task force, you don't want to, people have different opinions. You don't want to point somebody out and say, this person said this. You just can't do that. But I will say this, we have a person in our task force who says, we chose Faith-Based Solutions, not Guideposts, because their conviction was we couldn't choose Guideposts. Mm-hmm. And so when you meet the folks, when you understand the reality of it, this is a division of a larger company, but they're a division of people that share our values. They came to us. That's why we felt comfortable making this decision. Now we know there are a lot of folks that aren't yet comfortable with that, which is why we're having these conversations, because we want to help people to see how we got where we are, and that and people of goodwill disagree on this. I get it. So what we're trying to do is help people to see how we came here, and if we had found other options, we would certainly have presented those. And we shared our information. We with the credentials committee, the way they said, you got to show your work, and show your homework, And so we published on our website, here are the firms, and we didn't publish their names, obviously, but we listed them out, their qualities. And so we did, we're all volunteers. We did the best we could to find anybody else. And we've asked, and to this day, we still haven't found anyone who said, I got this company, they're perfect to do this. Right. We got the exact choice for you. No one's offered that yet. So here we are, and we're saying, here's Faith-Based Solutions. They created this whole thing for us because they respected us enough to do this. And talk to Samantha, and you'll have a different angle on this.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Pastor Nelson, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, all I would say is if individuals that are watching this haven't done already, go to our website. I sound like a broken record, but I'm going to keep saying it. Go to our website and watch the interview with Samantha Kilpatrick and Dr. Evans, where she explains where she's coming from, or where she gives her background. Don't listen to us. Go listen to her in her own words, where she comes from. Marshall does an interview with her, and I think it speaks for itself. And so, people have heard us, or they've talked to us, or they want to, and that's fine. but you can go to the website and hear from the lady that is going to be leading the Faith-Based Solutions division. Go listen to her. And she's the one that is one of us that's going to be leading this. I want you to hear her voice.
We're going to take a break right now. And when we come back with Pastor Nelson and Pastor Blaylock, we're going to talk about what it is to be credibly accused and when someone is put on the ministry checklist, what that actually means. So stay with us. We'll be back with more from Baptist Press this week.
So here at the College of Southeastern, we are equipping students to give their lives for the cause of Christ in the church, among the nations, and in every aspect of society. So the College of Southeastern is not just a Bible college. While the Bible is the foundation for all of our degrees and even all of our courses, we're going to equip students in a variety of fields so that they can give their lives for the cause of Christ in any number of different ways.
And the context that we have here, the kind of education that we have here, is not a choosing between a really good education versus a Christian education. I think the best education possible is one that holds Christ at the center, who is the truth and the way and the life.
I would stack our graduates up against any university graduates. They really receive a well-rounded education, a tough education, but at the same time, really being filled up with learning to live out the gospel.
Truly, everything we do is to equip students to give their lives for Christ's cause in the church, among the nations, and every aspect of society. When you leave this place, you really do look more like Jesus. If you want your life to be that, then you need to be here.
Pastor Blaylock and Pastor Nelson, thanks for being our guest on Baptist Press this week. One of the questions that we have is about being credibly accused, and specifically when somebody's placed on the ministry checklist. Is that a sense that once they're on that list, they're on it for the rest of their lives?
All right, so people's names can go on the Ministry Check website if they're credibly accused, and that has 4 different pathways. 1, a conviction in court. 2, a civil judgment. 3, a confession in a non-privileged setting. And 4, if a church commissions an independent investigation that meets our standards and is reviewed by the database manager as being legally defensible based on our standards, then those names would go on the Ministry Check website. There are a couple pieces of this that are really important to understand. And we're not saying that people on that website can't be forgiven of their sin. We're not saying those people can't come to faith in Christ and have their lives changed. We're not saying any of those things. In fact, we hope every one of those folks will repent of their sin and be restored to the fellowship of their own church and get their lives right. But the website's designed to help churches identify folks who have been abusers in the past. And so while someone may be forgiven and may have their fellowship restored in their church, this website helps churches to determine, has somebody done this in a church setting where we need to know about this before we hire somebody or put them in a volunteer position. So I do know this. I do know that sometimes people get convicted of certain crimes and they get a deal with a judge, and a year and a half later or 2 years later, it goes away. Not even on a background check anymore. You wouldn't even find it there. Well, that's not serving Southern Baptists very well. And you're right. Each state might have different criteria about who gets on whatever list they are on. But our list is a simple one. If someone's convicted, found a judgment, confessed, or found liable by credibly accused by an independent investigation, then they go on our list. And that doesn't mean that they can't be forgiven, they can't be restored. It just means every church needs to know this person's been credibly accused of abuse or convicted and needs to know about that.
Let's be clear here. In forgiveness and restoration, forgiveness is granted by God, but it doesn't mean that there isn't some kind of consequence with that action. And so there are consequences that come with those actions. And this is an especially egregious one in our world. And there are consequences of it. If somebody was doing that in my family, I'm not going to let you babysit my children. I can forgive you, I can love you, but I'm going to keep you there. And there are other ministries within the church that individual can work. But we want our churches, and again, I go back to this: the over 70% of our small churches that don't have the resources to find out this, that, and the third. We want them to have the resources to know: does this person need to work in the children's ministry, in VBS, and D Now? Does this person need to be going on the super summer trip? And for Missouri, I'll use Missouri as an example. Until recently, we did not cooperate with the national database. And so if you did a background check, you had to run through, we use Ministry Safe in our church, and we had to run state, county, because our county didn't always work with the state, and national, which cost us even more money. Mm-hmm. This is a free resource that we're offering to Southern Baptists, that we will draw from those resources. And when those are credibly accused or have a civil judgment, then they will be put on those sites. And so this is a free resource. It doesn't cost any more. And the thing I love about it is that there are people like Ministry Safe that are actually cheering us on, saying, hey, get this out there. This needs to be for those churches that need to use it. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, we can forgive, we can restore, we can walk along the individual. Do they need Jesus? Yes and amen. But it doesn't come without consequence, and it doesn't come without boundaries. And those boundaries are critical for a safe church and for the survivors that are amongst us that haven't spoken up, for them to know that we are creating safe spaces for them to thrive also.
And you got to remember, 1 Timothy 3 gives qualifications for someone who would be an elder or leader in the church. And there's some serious qualifications on that list. We want to go by them, and being an abuser, a sexual abuser, is certainly a disqualifying quality.
I think I heard the answer to this in what you all have said, but just try to pull it out. When someone says, really, this is an overreach by the convention. If the local church has cleared or restored the local church, then how does the convention have the authority to keep them on this list? I think we're coming back to that local autonomy, friendly cooperation, the hierarchy model of church governance. Talk a little about that when you hear folks ask you that, when you hear folks say that how can this SBC ministry check go beyond when a local church says, well, we cleared Pastor so-and-so, I don't know why they haven't taken him off of that list?
Well, the way someone gets on the list is because the local church reports it. So that's how they get on the list. And if someone is credibly accused or convicted or confesses or has a civil judgment, that doesn't change. That's information on there that's not changed. So if somebody, it turns out they're found that the conviction was wrong and it's overturned, that would certainly change. And it would, the Ministry Check website needs to reflect the fact that the conviction was overturned for whatever reason. The person is no longer guilty. Mm-hmm. So that would be, if there was some finding that the accusation was false, then that would certainly require the information being removed and noted or whatever. But that'd be how you get off that list.
Okay.
And we're not saying that your local church, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
We're not saying that your local church can't bring somebody in that is a sexual abuser. We are saying, just like we said with the abuser earlier, that you have to walk. There are consequences for that action, and the consequence is that survivors may not trust you that are in your midst. There are survivors that are in your midst everywhere that are hearing you say, hey, I think that this guy's okay, even though they've been credibly accused, they've been convicted, they're on this site. And we have to be very careful with that. And so we are creating a free resource for churches to use. It's up to those churches whether or not they want to use it. It is their choice on whether or not they want to use it. And we want to, matter of fact, let's go even further. The messengers have demanded that we create this for our convention as a resource for our churches to be able to use. It's up to the local churches to use it.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying about the local autonomy of the local church, but I'm thinking too about Messengers in Nashville in 2021 that passed a measure that said that churches who have sex offenders, sex abusers on their staff are not to be found in friendly cooperation. That's just kind of my rough language there of what Messengers passed. And so I was thinking earlier while you all were answering just about how really there are dots being connected specifically from 2021, well, actually all the way back to 2019 to 2021 to 2022, things that will happen, Lord willing, in New Orleans at that annual meeting, and then moving forward from there. So if a name is on that ministry check based on what the Messengers passed in 2021, the local church may say that that person is redeemed, has been exempted, all of those things. But by nature of their name being on that ministry check, someone could turn them into the credentials committee, and the credentials committee do their work, and the potential is there for that church to be found not in friendly cooperation because they have someone on their staff who is on the ministry check list, right?
That's a question for the credentials committee to answer.
Okay.
But
yeah,
it's true that we want to help churches not allow abusers to be in positions where they could harm people again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can't force churches to do anything. And in fact, we wouldn't want to. But we do believe it's our responsibility, based on what Messengers voted for us to do, to help churches know information that they need to know. And if there's something that they consider disqualifying, that's important for them to know. And we don't want them not to have the information. That's our goal. That's what Baptists ask us to do. And what happens after that is not neither John nor I are in charge of who does what with the information. But we want to help churches. That's the goal. And here's the other piece. Everybody says we want to stop sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never heard anybody come to me and say, Pastor, I love you and all, but we got to allow sex abuse to happen in our church. No one believes. No one believes that. But here's where the rub comes. As soon as it costs us something, now suddenly it goes down the priority list.
Right.
And we're hopefully helping churches to see that yes, this may not be business as usual anymore, but it's important enough to stop sexual abuse. I'm willing to make some changes. And I care enough about our kids and our church. I'm willing to make changes that are necessary. I care enough about our people that I'm willing to take these steps. And I think part of the deal is I want to go by the Bible too. And if you're putting somebody in a ministry position who doesn't meet the qualifications of 1 Timothy 3, I'm not in charge of anybody else's church, but I would suggest that there is one who is, and I would answer them.
Well, one of the other things that the task force is charged with, which is not a minor thing in and of itself, is education and awareness. And so we wanted to spend just a few minutes with you talking about some of those things, some things that are being discussed and developed and maybe even coming between now and the annual meeting from the task force.
One of the things that we've had the opportunity to do is we have all the state conventions that have put out some type of their own sexual abuse task force report. We've had the chance to review them. And honestly, they're excellent. A lot of them are doing some great work. And we are seeing our work as just another tool in the toolbox for each of these state conventions. And not every state convention has moved. Some of them are moving this year. Some are just getting started. But we are just another tool in that toolbox for them. And which is so much fun to be able to work together. And again, that's where we're the best, is when we work together across all those lines and independent churches and say, hey, how do we stamp out this scourge in our churches? And so at the end of this month, on the 28th of March, if you're watching this and you're a chair or the chair of your sexual abuse task force, invite them to come to Atlanta. We're going to be meeting with all the task force chairs and talking together, sitting in a room and talking together about what is your state doing, what is your state doing. And there may be things that in Missouri, it works for Missouri. There may be things South Carolina that works for South Carolina, but there are a lot of things that work across those state lines that we need to know and share. And we need to put on a national scale so that we all know and we can all work together. And so I'm looking forward to March 28th, sitting together with those state chairs to be able to share that information and really kind of work across that line.
That's good.
It's actually been one of the most enjoyable parts. When you're working to help prevent sex abuse, you can't really say you're enjoying the work, but I'm just telling you, getting to meet the different state leaders, getting involved in seeing how they're doing things, because we believe the most effective change happens at the more local level.
Yeah.
And so associations, individual churches, state conventions, that's where the real work of preventing sex abuse happens. And so we've been very excited about helping and sort of helping cross-pollinate too some of the things that they're doing in different states. And so we're looking forward to that March 28th opportunity to visit with the state leaders.
Yeah, very good. Anything else? We've touched on lots of topics, some pretty deep things. Anything else that you all would like to add before we wrap up?
I will jump in and say, like a broken record over and over, go to abusereformtaskforce.net. And I think that's the umpteenth time I've said that. But the reason I say that is because after every one of our meetings, we put out an update. We want you to know what we're doing. I think a lot of Southern Baptists felt like this was a cloak and dagger operation. We just came out of nowhere and said Faith-Based Solutions. No, we've been posting on that site to let you know we met here. This is what we talked about. This is what we've done. And so don't believe your social media. Don't believe, whatever you hear, your friendly neighbor at the mailbox. Come read the website. We're telling you what we're doing. We're putting out videos so you can see what we're doing. And we're not trying to hide anything. We want you to know it. I think Brother Marshall said it really well. We are 9 volunteers that are taking off our time and away from our families to do this. I read online this week, I'm getting paid big. And I told my wife, I need to find that check. My kids would love it, right? But we're volunteers that see this as a way to help our Southern Baptist family. And that's why we give up our time to do this. And we love doing it. Because it's worth it to see the kingdom of God expand. And so go to our website, abusereformtaskforce.net, read what we have out there. And then if you have questions, our name and information is on there. Please feel free to contact us.
So, John, they only pay the chairman.
Oh, there you
go. That's not true either. No, we're all volunteers. And the sad thing is most of our meetings have been on national holidays. So we're taking time away from homes and families, meeting on holidays, because that was the time we could get together with our calendars being so crazy. So people have sacrificed a lot. So here's the bottom line for us and for me today, visiting with you and your all the viewers. I think we all share the same heart. We want to see the Lord glorified in our churches. We want to see people sent overseas to share the good news of the gospel all over the world. We want every nation, every people, every language to hear the good news of Jesus. Now, but if our churches aren't safe at home, then it compromises us in that sacred effort. And so everything we're doing is to make it possible for our churches to be the safest place on earth. And it may seem awkward to start asking people to do background checks on a regular basis. It may seem awkward to ask people to have 2 volunteers in a room at all times with little kids, or it may seem awkward to put cameras up inside your nursery center if you have a big enough place to do that. I mean, some of these things are awkward and hard to do. And some of the steps we're taking are not as simple as one would hope that they would be. But won't it be worth it? Won't it be worth it when 25 years from now, there's a whole generation of kids that grew up and none of them are saying, yeah, that church didn't protect us from sexual abusers.
Yeah.
It'll be great when we have a whole generation that is able to go around the world and share the gospel without being wounded by sex abuse as kids in church. So That's the bottom line for us. We care about this because the Lord put it on our hearts. I wish the Lord to give me some other things to be burdened with this year, to be honest with you. But this is the weight John and I bear because God asked us to take this burden, and we're pleased to share it because we care about the SBC. We love our churches. We love the gospel. We want to see it, our mission boards prosper and send people around the world. That's our goal. And we want healthy churches. This is one way to get us there.
Yeah. Well, we sure appreciate you both taking time today to be with us on Baptist Press This Week. Thanks for joining us for Baptist Press This Week, brought to you by the College at Southeastern. You can learn more about them by going to collegeatsoutheastern.com. You can also find more stories from Baptist Press at our website and sign up for our daily emails. That's all at baptistpress.com.